Committee will come to order. Today we're going to be discussing the opportunities and challenges associated with advanced nuclear energy commercialization. But before we do, I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge that our time with our nuclear fellow, Dr. Sarah Stevenson, is coming to an end. Sarah, wave your hand. That's Sarah. Sarah has been an integral part of our team here, and she will be missed as she goes on to do greater things for our Air Force. So I just want to personally thank Sarah, and I know our whole team does, and we're all going to miss her because she's been a tremendous contributor to what we've been doing and how far we're advancing, and basically educating people concerning on what nuclear has done, what it will do, and what it can do. And that's what we're relying on. So she's going to be missed. Our conventional nuclear fleet of light water reactors has provided reliable power for over 60 years and makes up about 95 gigawatts of generation capacity and around 20% of our annual energy production. Nuclear power is available 24/7, emissions-free, making it incredibly important to our energy security while also keeping us able to meet our climate goals. DOE estimates that 200 gigawatts of new nuclear plants will be needed by 2050, more than double our current nuclear capacity. We must have this reliable power for our critical infrastructure, our defense, our homes, and most importantly, our economy. There's a growing sense that the next generation of nuclear power will have a smaller footprint using different technologies than we've relied on in the past. These advanced nuclear technologies have the potential to play a significant role in securing our energy security and independence. Advanced reactors have a range of end uses. For example, advanced reactors under 50 megawatts, often called microreactors, have the potential to provide off-grid energy for remote towns, villages, and defense applications. And small modular reactors, which can provide several hundred megawatts of power, have the potential to provide traditional baseload power generation as well as more flexibility for peaking and also high-temperature process heat for industrial applications. In the last few years, Congress has provided significant investments through public-private partnerships to support the demonstration of first-of-a-kind reactors, such as the Department of Defense Project or PELE. I have supported PELE as a member of the Armed Services and Appropriations Committee. This transportable microreactor will provide 5 megawatts of safe and secure power for 3 years without needing to be refueled, circumventing the risk associated with transporting additional diesel generators and large volumes of diesel fuel for our forces. The PELE reactor is also small enough to be transported anywhere in the world by C-17 aircrafts. And I'm proud to say its inaugural flight will be carried out by the West Virginia National Guard C-17 fleet. This didn't happen, things happen like that. In addition to supporting PELE, Congress has supported commercial technology demonstrations through the Department of Energy's Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program. The bipartisan infrastructure law provided $2.4 billion to support competitive DOE awards for advanced reactor demonstration projects at commercial scale. The TerraPower project in Wyoming and the X-Energy project in Texas have won grants under this program. TerraPower's reactor is being built at a retiring coal facility and will be used to follow daily electric load changes, and X-Energy has partnered with Dow to provide heat and power for one of their manufacturing plants. I look forward to hearing more on the progress of some of these demonstration projects from our expert panel of witnesses today. Building upon these demonstration programs, the Inflation Reduction Act provided 10 years of certainty to commercialize advanced reactors through a 30% investment tax credit or $25 per megawatt hour production tax credit for new nuclear plants, along with making tens of millions of dollars in Title 17 loan guarantees available for nuclear projects. And we ensured a 10% bonus credit for advanced nuclear and coal communities, like my home state of West Virginia, and these fit perfectly there. And Ranking Member Barrasso's home state of Wyoming, which you'll have one of the first ones installed there. And other communities that have sacrificed for generations to power our country, but now face the threat of being sidelined during the energy transition, which we're not going to let happen. The IRA incentives were not just about building power plants, but also securing our nuclear supply chain. Congress provided $700 million for high-assay low-enriched uranium, or HALEU, which is the fuel that most advanced nuclear technologies need, including PELE, TerraPower, and X-Energy. But despite all of the federal private sector support, we're witnessing struggles and hesitancy in getting advanced nuclear projects off the ground. There are large design, cost, and regulatory uncertainties associated with a first-of-a-kind nuclear technology, which is why we've now created numerous federal programs to help reduce these risks. But someone will need to go first, and unfortunately, many of the utilities that I have spoken with won't get in the game until others have done it first. We also must continue to ensure that taxpayer dollars are being spent judiciously and we're managing risk and learning from instances like the NuScale project with UAMPS, which fell far short of all of our expectations. I'm grateful to have our witnesses here today to discuss their plans and challenges as they attempt to build the first generation of advanced reactors in our country, and we are in a competitive race with other people around the world as we sit here today. And looking further into the future, several of the incentives Congress has created for new nuclear sunset after 2032. So I'm interested to hear what our witnesses think is needed to create sustained development for coming decades. That means how will we basically be able to maintain cost competitiveness with our nuclear fleet. It's clear to me that our country is at a critical juncture, and our actions today will impact our nuclear landscape for years to come. The U.S. has long been a leader in civil nuclear energy, which has allowed us to share our expertise and gold standards for safety and nonproliferation around the world. Over time, Russia and China have made a concerted effort to supplant our nuclear leadership. We must push back, and they cannot succeed. To regain our civil nuclear leadership, we need to demonstrate domestically that we can develop and deploy the next generation of nuclear energy to attract our international partners. We also need to export these technologies to our allies and partners to help reduce their energy dependence on foreign adversaries. That is why Senator Risch and I introduced the International Nuclear Energy Act and the Civil Nuclear Export Act to provide strategic guidance and the financing mechanisms required for the U.S. to retake its leadership position on the global stage. But our adversaries aren't just pushing to dominate the export market for our nuclear technology. Putin has a stranglehold on nuclear supply chain. Currently, Russia is the only commercial supplier of HALEU, the fuel used for our DoD microreactor project, DOE advanced reactor demonstration projects, and many other advanced nuclear technologies. That is why I've led the Bipartisan Nuclear Fuel Security Act of 2023, along with my ranking member here, Senator Barrasso, and Senator Risch, which authorizes a DOE program to onshore U.S. uranium conversion and enrichment capacity for both traditional and advanced reactors. We must reestablish a domestic nuclear supply chain, and our bill will do just that. I've also worked with Senator Barrasso and other members of this committee to introduce legislation that would limit and eventually ban uranium fuel imports from Russia. Today, I'm calling on my congressional colleagues to include these critical nuclear fuel bills and associated funding in the defense and appropriation packages that we're currently negotiating. I look forward to hearing our witnesses' views of what else we need to do to achieve our shared vision of American advanced nuclear commercialization and, most importantly, global leadership. We have a distinguished panel representing the government and industry perspectives that are essential to discuss this public-private partnership. So before I introduce the panel, I'm going to turn to Senator Barrasso for his opening remarks.
Well, thanks, Mr. Chairman. And first, after our last hearing, you announced that this would be your final term in the United States Senate. And I want to just take this opportunity to say that I've appreciated the chance for us to work together, look forward to continuing that work through the next session of the next year. And look, we agree on lots of things. We disagree on some, we agree on a lot, and on issues that is, without question, everyone agrees your patriotism, your desire to do the best for the country and for the people of West Virginia. You've done that. You worked hard at it as governor, now in the United States Senate. I'm looking forward to continuing to work with you in your leadership position.
Thank you, my friend.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
And now to the hearing ahead. Thanks for holding today's hearing. Nuclear energy is fundamental to meeting our energy, our environmental, and our national security objectives. The United States generates more electricity from nuclear power than any other country in the world. At the same time, we are heavily reliant on foreign sources of uranium to fuel our existing nuclear reactors. We lack the ability to fuel new advanced reactors that developers are looking to build into the next decade. That's why the Senate voted 96-3 to adopt the Nuclear Fuel Security Amendment that Chairman Manchin and I filed to this year's National Defense Authorization Act. It is critically important that we enact this provision into law. Russia and China are on the cusp of obtaining a commanding share of the nuclear energy market. For decades, they have undermined America's nuclear industry. They're using their position in the market to further their military and their geopolitical objectives. Russia controls half of the world's enrichment capacity. Putin uses revenue from sales and enrichment uranium to support his brutal and unprovoked war in Ukraine. China seeks to steal U.S. technology for its own gain. The world is eager to reap the benefits of nuclear power. We can't allow Russia and China to dominate this global market, and we must reestablish America as a global leader in nuclear energy. We are the global leaders in nuclear technology development. We should also be the global leaders in nuclear technology deployment. The world is ready to buy America's superior nuclear reactors. They want to see them operating first. As of May of this year, more than 20 nuclear projects were under consideration across North America. We have a map right here of all these under consideration. The Department of Energy is supporting several of these advanced reactor projects. This includes TerraPower's Natrium reactor, which will be built in my home state of Wyoming. Now, not all of these projects are going to be successful. This was made clear to us earlier this month, and the chairman made mention of it in his opening statement, when NuScale canceled its project with the Utah Associated Municipal Power System. Last week, we learned that the Air Force rescinded a contract for the advanced reactor in Alaska. I understand the Air Force still intends to pursue an advanced reactor in the state. We must have several options in development. We also need to build more than one of any given design. America's nuclear industry has a history of building first-of-a-kind reactors. We move on to the newest design before benefiting from the cost savings garnered through repetition. Can't continue this pattern. We must successfully demonstrate first-of-a-kind advanced reactors. Then we need to deploy 2, 3, 4 more of those units. Reactor vendors need sufficient orders on their books to justify mass marketing and mass manufacturing. That's how we make nuclear more affordable. America's nuclear industry is competing against state-owned entities in Russia and China. The U.S. government has an important role to play supporting America's nuclear industry. We should make strategic investments. The federal government can serve as a customer. The Defense Department is already considering procuring a microreactor for its operations in Alaska. The Department of Energy's 17 national labs could also use advanced reactors. To be clear, Congress can't provide limitless funding or tax credits. We shouldn't enact policies that distort local electricity markets. We can, however, help to reduce the financial risk for reactor developers. I'm particularly interested in how Congress can redirect existing appropriations or programs. I want to thank the witnesses for joining us today. I look forward to their testimony. And Mr. Chairman, you had mentioned the good work that you had done with Member Risch, and he is now here, and just wanted to mention to him, you talked about some of the great bipartisan work that you and the Senator have done.
Senator Risch has been tremendous on this. We've acknowledged that we have a problem, and Senator Risch, if you want to say a few things on that.
Yeah, thank you. First of all,
he's been hot on this.
I appreciate the acknowledgement. I guess probably one of the reasons I have been such is we're home to the Idaho National Lab, as you know, which is the flagship laboratory for nuclear energy and the birthplace of nuclear energy. And I think John is the custodian of the first 3 light bulbs ever lit by nuclear energy in 1951 out there on the desert in southeast Idaho. We've built 52 reactors there, and we are the flagship and very proud of it and anxious to move forward. And this is really an appropriate hearing on this matter. I serve on both Intel and Foreign Relations as well as this committee, so these all intersect there, and I'm dialed in on what's happening internationally. And I can tell you, this is incredibly competitive internationally. The Russians and the Chinese are both working aggressively as we move to the next generations of reactors, the SMRs and the micros that will be coming along. And these are things we need to lead on. And it's important to us, not only from an economic standpoint, because we all know there's money to be made in this business, but secondly, when we enter into these kinds of relationships, as Dr. Wagner and I said in a editorial that we just jointly wrote, this becomes a 100-year relationship with a company. And America's national security depends upon relationships with other countries and creating allies, and this is certainly one way to do it. And again, on this subject matter, Dr. Wagner and I just penned an editorial that was published this week. I think we all know what needs to be done and what we want to do. I think what we ought to focus on is how do we do it? Because we're all in agreement. This isn't a partisan issue. This isn't Republican, Democrat. We're all Americans, and there is a national interest here that we all get together and pull the wagon on. So I think we ought to focus on how we do that. Thanks so much for holding the chair.
Thank you. And you've been a tremendous partner on this, Senator Rich, and we appreciate it. Now we're going to turn to our witnesses. Today we have Dr. John Wagner, Director of Idaho National Laboratory. We have Dr. Jeff Waxman, Program Manager, Office of the Secretary of Defense and Strategic Capabilities Office. We have Mr. Edward Stones, Vice President, Energy and Climate with Dow. And then we have finally the Honorable Jeff Merrifield, Vice Chair of the U.S. Nuclear Industry Council and a former Commissioner of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And Dr. Wagner, we will start with you.
Thank you. Chairman Manchin, Ranking Member Barrasso, and members of this committee, thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today. My name is John Wagner, as was said. I'm the director of the Idaho National Laboratory, the nation's Center for Nuclear Energy Research and Development. I also want to thank members of this committee, including our own Senator Risch of Idaho, for the longstanding support for the U.S. commercial nuclear industry and for global leadership in nuclear technology. I think you'll find my remarks pretty consistent with a number of the opening remarks that have already been made. Over the past several years, much has changed. Public opinion polls show increasingly broad support for nuclear energy, and nuclear energy now has bipartisan and bicameral support in Congress. Through both legislative and technical efforts, the U.S. is on the cusp of achievements that could usher in a new era of nuclear energy and reestablish U.S. global leadership. And so it's no longer a matter of whether we need advanced nuclear technologies. It's a matter of how much nuclear power do we need, how can we enable first movers, and how quickly can we develop and deploy these new reactors. That's important for several reasons: the stability of our power grid, bolstering the national economy, enhancing national security, and meeting the nation's clean energy goals. While my written testimony addressed these topics in detail, I'd like to focus my time here on actions the U.S. can take to advance nuclear reactor commercialization. First, we must address the challenges associated with first-of-a-kind cost and schedule uncertainties that discourage first movers. I'll note that if our electricity markets properly valued firm, dispatchable, non-carbon emitting attributes of nuclear energy, this would be far less of a challenge that we're talking about today. One option, though, is to encourage and incentivize first mover projects that repurpose existing infrastructure. A great example of this, as was mentioned, is TerraPower's Natrium project in Wyoming, which will be built at a site where the coal plants are scheduled to retire. These sites often have a capable and supportive workforce and existing infrastructure like transmission and distribution lines that can be repurposed. In addition, the federal government's energy needs represent an opportunity for first movers. The range of government and defense installations, national laboratories, and remote power needs in rural communities create an ideal environment for deploying nuclear technologies. Another consideration is to lengthen the time of power purchase agreements. There are opportunities for federal entities, such as military installations and national laboratories, to leverage power purchase agreements. This would enable meeting federal clean energy goals with nuclear energy through better alignment with the long lifetimes of nuclear reactors. The Department of Energy is currently limited to 10 years for power purchase agreements, while the Department of Defense has more flexible authority. A more uniform approach could increase the attractiveness and deployment of nuclear energy at DOE sites around this country. As discussed in the March hearing and was referred, to enable deployment, the U.S. must quickly develop new domestic mining, conversion, and enrichment capabilities. Doing so will ensure the availability of a domestic supply of fuel, provide certainty to the existing plants, and help ensure our domestic energy security. We also need to address the back end of the fuel cycle. The Nuclear Waste Policy Act reflects dated national priorities and concerns. Various attempts have been made to amend the Nuclear Waste Policy Act. to better reflect the nuclear waste management realities, policies, and needs of today, but none have yet succeeded. A new waste policy framework is needed. And finally, while not the jurisdiction of this committee, to enable timely demonstrations and support large-scale nuclear energy deployment, we need an effective and efficient licensing process, one that recognizes and values the benefits of nuclear energy for public health and safety and climate mitigation and encourages innovation. This challenge is particularly acute for advanced reactors, which may raise unique regulatory questions and be smaller in size, resulting in a much higher proportional impact from regulatory and cost challenges. Such reforms can be done without compromising safety or transparency. We have written a report documenting some of our recommendations. I want to conclude by saying that despite the numerous challenges, I am optimistic about nuclear energy in our nation and around the world. We are no longer debating the need for nuclear energy. Instead, we have moved into discussions about how much nuclear energy we require and how we can address and overcome challenges to deployment, particularly first movers. Thank you for this committee's attention to this topic and for the opportunity to participate today. I look forward to the questions.
Thank you. Now we'll have Dr. Waxman.
Thank you, Chairman Manchin, Ranking Member Barrasso, and distinguished members of the committee for the opportunity to testify before you today on the Department of Defense's efforts associated with advanced reactor commercialization. It's an honor and privilege to appear before you today. My name is Dr. Jeff Waxman. I'm the Program Manager for Project Pele, a prototype transportable micronuclear reactor within the Strategic Capabilities Office of the Office of Secretary of Defense. Project Pele is a 1 to 5 megawatt nuclear reactor prototype designed to fit within 4 20-foot shipping containers capable of being transported by truck, rail, boat, and plane. It will be set up and moved within several days. Using TRISO fuel, Pele is designed to be passively safe in all failure modes. The DoD, through SCO, initiated Project Pele in the fall of 2018. I've been the program manager of this project since its inception. Modern warfare is critically dependent on large quantities of electricity to power almost everything, from missile defense radars to command and control systems to uncrewed weapon systems and platforms. There are significant mission impacts to the department without access to reliable, resilient 24/7 power. The strategic need for electrical power at defense installations is critical, yet today that electricity is largely dependent upon the delivery of huge volumes of fossil fuels to power generators. Moving fossil fuels was a significant challenge even in Iraq and Afghanistan, leading General Mattis to declare desperate need to, quote, unleash us from the tether of fuel. When the department plans for future competition and conflict with near-peer adversaries, the challenge to move fossil fuel across thousands of miles of ocean is immense. Consistent with the 2022 National Defense Strategy, innovative, clean energy technologies such as nuclear power are true potential game changers. Additionally, transportable nuclear microreactors provide the capability to support remote outposts or to respond quickly when natural disasters destroy existing infrastructure. SCO undertook a design competition for Project Pele with 3 companies initially selected in early 2020 to develop preliminary designs. We eventually down-selected to a single prime contractor, BWXT, which is currently working to finalize the last details of the design while manufacturing fuel and purchasing long lead hardware. SCO is working with the Department of Energy to gain approval of the Pele engineering design by mid-2024. We have already begun fabricating fuel, making moderator blocks, and forging the containment vessel. Our team is on pace to have the Pele reactor assembled by mid-2025. As part of this administration's strategy for reestablishing U.S. leadership in nuclear energy, the U.S. is focused on the development of markets for U.S. nuclear technology exports to provide reliable, always-on, emissions-free electricity and power. With bipartisan support, this administration is working to scale up U.S. technology deployment, including small modular reactors and microreactors. Work is also ongoing to secure and sustain the nuclear fuel supply chain, enhance energy security and resilience, strengthen nuclear safety, security, safeguards, and nonproliferation, and to compete globally. Given current emerging threats and the military's need for reliable power without long logistics tails, we may be willing to pay a little extra per kilowatt hour to make that happen. And by demonstrating the Pele reactor, we can also collect the data and perform the safety analyses to help inform the regulatory and supply chain pathways to commercial reactor variants as well. In closing, I would like to thank Congress for its continued strong bipartisan support of Project Pele. And in light of Chairman Manchin's announcement of retirement at the end of the 118th Congress, I would like to personally thank him for his steadfast support of Project Pele. I can state definitively that this program would not have proceeded as fast as it has without his support. Thank you to the entire committee for calling this hearing and for the opportunity to testify. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Ed Jones. Ed Stones.
Thank you, Chairman Manchin, Ranking Member Barrasso, and distinguished members of the committee. Earlier this year, Dow announced our Seadrift, Texas site as the location for an advanced small modular nuclear project with X-Energy. And the purpose of the project is to provide the entire site with safe, reliable, zero-emissions power and steam, preparing the site for a more sustainable future by enabling us to sell lower-emissions products. At the heart of the project is the installation of 4 of X-Energy's XE100 high-temperature gas reactors to replace the site's existing energy and steam assets. We expect to submit construction permit applications to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission early next year, and if granted the permit, we anticipate beginning construction on the nuclear assets in 2026 and expect to be operational by approximately 2030. The use of advanced nuclear is consistent with Dow's strategy, and that strategy is to decarbonize and grow, meaning that we're investing in both growing our ability to serve our customers and in reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. At Dow, we use approximately 10 gigawatts of energy from fuel to produce heat, power, and steam at 25 major manufacturing sites worldwide. That's enough energy for more than 7 million homes, which is more than the number of homes in Michigan and Louisiana combined. This means that in order to reduce the emissions, we must replace end-of-life energy assets with known, proven technologies that enable us to decarbonize. Dow is a leading user of renewable energy. In fact, we're among the top 20 global corporate purchasers, having secured access to over 1,000 megawatts. Traditional clean energy sources, such as wind and solar and storage, are a valuable resource to meet climate goals, but cannot be relied upon alone as they present reliability challenges. They must be paired with both baseload sources, such as low-emissions energy from natural gas, or emissions-free sources such as nuclear. Nuclear energy, especially advanced small modular reactors, is a long-term viable source of low-carbon emitting sustainable energy. Advanced SMRs offer the advantage of baseload replacement and renewable supplement with better environmental performance and fewer issues than conventional nuclear. Our manufacturing operations require a constant 24/7 supply of heat and power and steam. We can't have interruptions. X-Energy's technology provides clean, reliable, and safe baseload power to an electricity system or support to industrial applications requiring high pressure and high temperature steam. Advanced nuclear provides a huge opportunity for industrial users of power and steam, but navigating the deployment challenges will require continued engagement between the private sector and federal government. To realize the opportunity of advanced nuclear technology in the U.S., we see 3 key areas of risk and opportunity, and they're all inextricably linked. And those are fuel, timing, and budget. On fuel, concerns about the long-term availability and geopolitical issues related to uranium supply could impact the sustainability of nuclear power. Industrial customers need confidence that fuel supply will enable steady operation and operating costs. I know this issue in particular is something this committee has been working on, and we appreciate the leadership shown by the chairman to develop the fuel. On timing, most industrial users will install advanced nuclear technologies to replace existing assets that are reaching the end of their lives. Therefore, projects must be delivered on strict timelines. Ensuring that regulatory frameworks are adaptable and efficient is crucial to avoiding prolonged approval timelines. I want to compliment the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. The NRC has undergone a shift in mindset from permitting traditional nuclear to now permitting advanced nuclear assets like SMRs, and I appreciate their willingness to listen and consider new ideas while continuing to hold applicants to high standards when it comes to safety and operability. On budget, capital costs must be clear, must be competitive, and must be constant. Significant changes in timing affect costs, and the lack of a fuel source affects the timing significantly and therefore costs as well. I want to thank the committee for sponsoring the legislation creating the Advanced Reactor Development Program administered by the DOE. The value of this 50-50 cost share is crucial for Dow to take on a project like this. In addressing these 3 risks, it's crucial for government, industry, and the research community to work collaboratively. Clear regulatory frameworks, strategic investments, and commitments to innovation are essential for the successful deployment of advanced nuclear technologies. In conclusion, members, thank you for the opportunity to be here today and to offer support for the acceleration of advanced nuclear technology deployment. I hope you will continue to engage us in close partnership with the private sector. We want to be a resource in these discussions, and I'd be happy to take any questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Now we'll have Mr. Merrifield.
Chairman Manchin, Ranking Member Barrasso, and members of the committee, thank you for asking me to testify today. As stated, I am here in my role as the Vice Chairman of the U.S. Nuclear Industry Council, although my full-time occupation is a partner in the nuclear energy practice at Pillsbury Law Firm. I want to express our appreciation of the committee as well as the Senate and House for the overwhelming bipartisan support that nuclear energy enjoys today. This is far different than the views toward nuclear energy that existed when I first became a junior Senate staffer in 1987. Unlike then, when large nuclear units were purchased solely by electric utilities, today there is a diverse group of advanced reactor developers who are working on remote-sited microreactors, molten salt research reactors, data centers, steel mills, chemical complexes, mining operations, and offshore-mounted platforms. Companies such as Dow, Microsoft, Google, and Nucor are considering how nuclear energy can meet their need for clean power and industrial heat. Possessing large balance sheets and significant project management capabilities, these companies are not deterred by the complexity and patience that comes with the deployment of nuclear. But this begs a question. Where are the electric utilities? While some, including Ontario Power Generation in Canada and Tennessee Valley Authority, have leaned further forward, many U.S. nuclear utilities have not yet committed to new nuclear generation. Rather, many of these utilities indicate that they want to buy the second, third, or fourth unit of a given design. Why is that? The answer is that financial markets and public utility commissions have viewed the path that it took to get Southern Company's Vogtle Units 3 and 4 online and have made it clear that they do not want to repeat that example. Despite government-backed loan guarantees and other federal tax incentives intended to jumpstart the process, utility executives who are compensated on meeting quarterly financial targets and managing PUC prudency reviews have a variety of incentives for not moving forward. Utility CEOs fear that if they commit to building a first-of-a-kind plant, it could have financial and timing risk on the back end of the project. One way to address this concern is to have a financial backstop program for first-of-a-kind nuclear deployment projects to share the risk between the utility and the federal government for potential delays and unexpected cost increases, and not force a single utility to bear undue risk for being the first to deploy a new design. Alternatively, you could provide financial incentives for utilities that come together in a consortium to build a series of nuclear plants and spread that cost among a larger pool. This risk-sharing model was utilized with mixed success in New England in the 1970s through the 1990s. Others, including former DOE Secretary Ernie Moniz, have been working on versions of a risk-sharing concept that could spur utilities to move forward. Yet, even if these efforts succeeded, Congress could take additional steps to further enable successful advanced reactor deployment. Frankly, our national capabilities to build large infrastructure projects are rusty. We need additional investment in university engineering programs focused on project management and civil construction, given that the non-nuclear portion of these plants represent 2/3 of the cost and materials needed to build the units. Congress should revisit the way it funds university-based programs supporting nuclear power to ensure that it fully covers the full scope of needed engineering disciplines. Since the invasion of Ukraine, our country has reviewed how we've sourced many critical components, and nuclear is no exception. Fabricating and manufacturing nuclear-grade components can't be done at the snap of your fingers. If we are to achieve the economies of scale needed to efficiently and cost-effectively manufacture small modular reactors here in the U.S., there is further work needed. For new nuclear suppliers, there are rigorous and costly training and quality assurance requirements that are appropriately imposed to meet NRC expectations. Congress could facilitate this supply by providing incentives to encourage existing non-nuclear manufacturers to enter the field. This could include training funded by the Departments of Energy and Commerce to educate non-nuclear suppliers about the potential opportunities. It could also include tax incentives for companies that seek to meet these qualification standards or who expend training resources to prepare their workers in these highly specialized nuclear trades. The events in Ukraine have also made it clear that our nation has become overly dependent on Russian-supplied, low-enriched, and high-assay, low-enriched uranium. While recent congressional efforts are helpful, Additional legislation, including creating a federally owned inventory of LEU and HALEU, is vital to help spur additional domestic enrichment investment. Toward this end, the President's recent request that $2.2 billion be included in the supplemental appropriations package to support critical domestic enrichment capabilities for LEU and HALEU is a needed step. As a former NRC commissioner, I have watched with some concern that the agency's efforts to develop a modernized regulatory framework for advanced reactors under a future Part 53, and I would ask that a copy of my recent testimony on this matter before the House Energy and Commerce Committee be included in the record. Thank you for asking me to testify. I look forward to your questions.
First of all, thank all of you. I appreciate very much your insight and also your presentation to the Senate, to all of us. We're going to start our questioning now, and I'll start. And I'm going to start, Dr. Wagner, very quickly. I was disappointed to hear about the new scale, and the UAMPS have to call off their SMR project, which received hundreds of millions, I understand about $770 million, up to $1.4 billion of a grant that was given, non-competitive. I cannot figure out how they were allowed to have a non-competitive grant up to 1.4. 2 weeks before that was announced, you had competitive competition between X-Energy and TerraPower. How in the world could we do that? And now we're out $771 million.
So, Senator, I can't speak to the process,
Okay.
of competitive or not.
Can you give me your thoughts on it then?
Okay. So just to be clear, I'm not a Department of Energy official.
I understand.
So, yeah.
We're so appreciative of where you are. You do a great job. I'm just saying, it came through y'all's lab. It was working with you all.
Okay, having said that, I'd say that the Idaho National Laboratory was actually proud to be selected for the site
Right.
of what was called the
Right.
Carbon-Free Power Project.
Gotcha.
This was a project that was led by Utah Associated Municipal Power Systems, or UAMPS, with the new scale small modular reactor technology. So that was going to be our role, was to providing a location and hopefully be a power off-taker to
The only thing I'm saying is it was the merit-based was done between TerraPower and X-Energy. They won those in a competitive. They showed technology that was viable. This one was just chosen without any type of competitive bidding or meeting any merits that we can see whatsoever. And it might be something for further discussion with DOE that might not include, but you all were very much involved because you were chosen as a site, working probably diligently towards that. Well, I've got another question I've got to get to. So if you would think about that. So go ahead. You want to say something?
Right. Well, I'd just like to say something a little bit further because, while I can't speak to the procurement process and so on and so forth, I can speak to a lot was accomplished with that project, despite the fact that it is ultimately decided to be terminated. A design certification for an advanced small light water reactor was accomplished. Experience with the licensing process, experience with developing the supply chain and so forth. So a lot was accomplished. So
Well, let me ask you this. The two that basically went through competitive bidding, which is Terra and X-Energy, are that technology the same? Does it help them in that development? Or you all to evaluate that process?
I would say that there are different technologies,
Right.
but there are benefits associated with exercising the licensing process for new reactors and other tangential benefits related to the supply chain.
I think, Mr. Merrifield, you hit it dead on the head what you were talking about, because I've been meeting, and some of us have been meeting with a lot of the utility heads. They are not going forward, and basically they're scared, from what happened with the Southern Company and the overruns and building a whole supply chain. We went through the whole thing, spent a lot of time with them. So we're in a situation now that we have to get in this race, and we've got to win it, because this technology should be a United States technology that we're basically deploying around the world, especially to our allies, so they're not dependent on foreign entities of concern, let's put it that way. So with that being said, where do we do this, and how do we, and I've come to the conclusion, it has to be a public-private partnership. The private sector has more appetite for risk, even though we're eliminating a lot of that risk with the investment from the IRA and the bipartisan infrastructure bill, but still yet, the utilities do not. They're answering to another entity as far as return on investment. How quick can we do this? And Dow, and I know, Mr. Stones, I want to hear because you're going down this path. And it's companies like Dow that's going to bring this to fruition, to this type of technology. So First, Mr.
Well,
Merrifield.
Senator, I think there are two baskets. We talked about the industrial pool, of which Dow and X Energy are one. That ARDP program has significant financial commitment to it, as is the case with TerraPower. For other reactor designs, both light water and other advanced reactors, they don't have that same benefit of the ARDP, and so utilities are more hesitant, and others are more hesitant to move forward with those. If you could put in some measures to provide greater risk sharing, I think hopefully that could put it in a position of incentivizing. And
What I would ask all of you all to do is this: when we talk about extra incentives, we have an awful lot of incentives. If you've seen, we've been criticized an awful lot by the incentives, but we're moving nuclear because we think nuclear is a major part of our energy supply. With that being said, tell us how to adjust some of the things we put in there that makes it easier, so you don't go through this bureaucratic maze of trying to get your credits or understanding how the credits work.
I think that production and investment tax credits were passed and put into law are going to provide an accelerator for follow-on units, 2, 3, 4, 5. The problem is the first one, and that's where I think there needs to be a backstop program so that if there are timing delays, there are cost overruns, that there can be a sharing of that cost and not burden that single company, whether it's a utility or an industrial user, for putting their neck out and trying to move forward with the technology.
Yeah, okay. Ms. Stone, why did you all make this decision to go down this route?
So I think the simple answer is, for us, it's part of our long-term path to zero. We can't imagine a 2050 decarbonized world without nuclear. We then go to, what does Dow bring? We bring a strong balance sheet. We bring a capability to build mega projects. We build a risk management scheme that we are living every day on every project. We pair that with a technology that we believe is advantaged in terms of both of its intrinsic safety and its ability to provide high-temperature steam. Put all that together with a strong framework of the infrastructure ARDP program and some of the stuff that's in the IRA that allows us to move forward.
Let me just say, I want to say one thing. I'm sorry, indulge me for this time. But my little state of West Virginia, who's been a heavy lifting state since its birth, if you will, we produced the energy with mining of all the coal that's been needed, and we produced it through the power that we've produced. For really the Kepler PJM system keeps it up and running. We've done everything humanly possible. As these plants are now being retired, some of them, the SMRs is basically the lifeblood of my little communities that can have the revenue they need, the job support that they need, things of this sort. And we are able to show them, it's like a plug and play, if you will. The switch gears are already there. They're ready to go. You don't have to reinvent anything. Same way in Senator Barrasso's Wyoming. Any of the heavy lifting coal states have been there. We just don't want to be left behind, and we'll do the transitioning. We just don't want to do it prematurely. We don't want to have early retirements. It basically holds us vulnerable to having dispatchable power. And there is so much intermittent power coming on, it's making the system, as far as our transmission, unreliable. And FERC and NERC have told us this, and we're not paying any attention. So we've got to get our act together, and this has got to be matured very quickly. So I'm totally in, totally committed to anything I can this next year to make this happen. Senator Barrasso.
Well, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I agree with you. I'm committed, as we all are on this committee. Mr. Stone, let me start with you, and I want to talk about fuel availability and in terms of key areas of risk. In your testimony, you listed fuel and then timing and budget as the key areas of risk. You listed fuel first. Do you consider fuel availability to be the greatest risk right now facing the project?
In this project for us, yes, because we've said we want to start this up about 2030. Does that have to be the 1st of January 2030? Maybe not, but it's not a long time because I've got existing assets that need to shut down. If we go past a place where our board can be comfortable that fuel is going to be available, we'll need to move back to what we do today, which is gas technology, and that will work, but it's missing an opportunity for the country.
So then, Mr. Merrifield, based on the fact that what we're hearing, fuel is the #1 concern. Lack of fuel is already impacting TerraPower's Natrium project in my home state of Wyoming. Difficult to gain confidence in nuclear when our nuclear fuel supply right now is subject to the will of Vladimir Putin, and I think we need to wean ourselves abruptly off of Russian uranium. So I'm encouraged by today's announcement that TerraPower and Uranium Energy Corporation are working to supply the Natrium reactor with domestic fuel. I have a press release from TerraPower dated today. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent that this be included in the record.
Without objection?
And, Mr. Chairman, rather than read the whole thing, let me just say that, Mr. Merrifield, in your testimony, you noted additional legislation and funding are needed to ensure availability of domestic fuel. We're working to include the National Fuel Security Act in this year's National Defense Authorization Act. Is fuel availability keeping advanced reactor developers up at night?
It is, and I think the Nuclear Fuel Security Act, which the two of you authored, actually I should say the three of you authored at the dais, is an important measure to move forward. Additional appropriations, as I mentioned in my testimony, is also critical as well.
Great. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm very encouraged by what TerraPower is trying to do with Uranium Energy Corporation and announcing this understanding of agreement to try to work on this, because it's critical. We're hearing that all across the board here. Dr. Waxman, you lead a program that explores how advanced reactors can help the Pentagon. The Air Force has a related program. So what gives the Department of Defense confidence to pursue advanced reactor technologies that have not yet been commercially demonstrated?
Well, I think a couple of things. One is that the Department of Defense, you know, in Louisiana, you've got to compete with 7 cents a kilowatt hour fuel, but a lot of the places where the Department of Defense operates, fuel cost of electricity is much, much higher. The Department of Defense is also willing to pay a little bit extra for resiliency and certainty, because we need to be sure that on a bad day, that the Department of Defense can still operate. Everything that we do requires electricity. And finally, I think the Department of Defense, due to its mission-driven focus, has the ability to drive lots of technologies. I'd like to remind people that the first commercial nuclear reactor ever built was built by the U.S. Navy. And so there's precedent here for the DoD driving technologies like nuclear. Thank you.
Okay, so Mr. Stone, in terms of non-traditional customers, most traditional utilities are cautious about investing in advanced reactors. Your company is eager to use advanced reactors to generate the electricity and the heat that it needs in its manufacturing operations. What factors led Dow to decide to be a first mover, and would you discuss the potential of nuclear energy for industrial manufacturers generally?
I mean, I think it goes back to our belief that long-term we need to get to a carbon-neutral power grid. Without nuclear, there's no way you can get there. You need that delivery of sustainable, reliable power and steam. And so for us, we can manage inflation. We can manage mega projects. We have a partner who has a very strong technology that allows us to go there. But it basically comes down to what we need from everybody here is certainty on the fuel, and then we need consistent permitting approaches that allow us to have the schedule met, which will allow us to be sure that the cost is going to work.
And then, Dr. Waxman, one last thing. Last week, we learned the Air Force rescinded a contract for an advanced reactor project in Alaska. Understand the Air Force still plans to pursue an advanced reactor in Alaska. Could you give us an update on the status of the project?
Well, since that's still procurement, it's procurement sensitive, I can't talk too much about it, but my understanding is, yes, that there still is an intent to award, and that's merely about figuring out some issues that might have happened during the procurement process itself, but they still do intend to award to somebody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. And now we turn to Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to associate my comments on the fuel with yours and the bill that you've introduced. Clearly, that's one of the bottlenecks that we have to address. Absolutely. Small point. Mr. Wagner, I used to be in the power production business. I could never finance a project on a 10-year power purchase agreement. I mean, did you say that you're only allowed to do a 10-year power purchase agreement?
That's correct. The Department of Energy's authorities are limited to 10 years.
Is that statutory or regulatory? Is that something we need to fix?
I believe, I'm not a lawyer, but I believe that it is something that you all would need to fix.
I think we need to address that, Mr. Chairman. They're not going to be able to do much of anything on that basis. Mr. Stone's permitting times and cost. Permitting times, is that, how big an issue is that? Are we talking 5 years, 10 years, 15 years?
I don't, we cannot last that long. This project is going to take, well, we hope to begin construction in 2026 for a project that starts.
Do you have your permits now?
We do not.
So that's an open
It's
question.
absolutely critical path.
Okay, then that's got to be something we address. The other question is cost. That's been the rap on nuclear energy for some time. The cost of conventional plants was so high. Do we see a path forward when we get to the third or fourth or fifth generation of these for a lower cost, a couple of $1,000s a megawatt rather than $5 or $6 million rather?
I won't speak to the exact numbers, but absolutely we see a path to a reliable and lower cost. We would not do this if we didn't. The key needs to separate what really needs to be nuclear technology and nuclear scale safety systems from conventional boilers and steam turbines that we would build in any of our plants today. These units have an intrinsic safety that allows them to be built with a much smaller footprint. So think 30 acres as opposed to 75 square miles for a nuclear exclusion zone. So that's intrinsically a very different design that really helps you reduce cost.
The chairman mentioned, though, I think one of the early mistakes we made was that every nuclear plant in the country was different.
Yeah.
And instead of getting the advantages of successive generations of essentially the same design, are we making the same mistake again in the small modular reactor development phase?
I don't believe so. I think, we will build 4, and we will build them hopefully in parallel rather than in sequence. And I think they will then be installed in groups of 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, something like that.
Mr. Merrifield,
Senator, may I comment on that? I think, I had in my written testimony, I talked about how the fact we only used to build large nuclear reactors because we had utilities. Today, there is such a diversity of industrial users that we're seeing, they simply can't be met by 1 or 2 reactor designs. You really do need to have a variety of different sizes of reactors and styles of reactors to make the different forms of industrial heat, power, remote uses, and other activities.
Don't you agree it would be beneficial? I understand you can't have just one design, but some consistency so that every single plant isn't a one-off. So
that's exactly right. I mean, I think all of the reactor designs envision that they would be built in a modular fashion in series. I think once we get the first one of a given design built, I think there will be a line of orders that will make it available to have multiples of those. The issue that we had previously was each reactor was built, was individually designed, even if it came from the same manufacturer. I think the designers today are committed, once they've got that permit from the NRC to approve that design, they're going to replicate that over and over and over again.
The key thing I think you observed is that there needs to be a sharing of the risk. I view this as a stone-cold national security priority. And for us to be able to compete and maintain the leadership in this area and also maintain emissions-free energy going into the next decades, it seems to me that I analogize this to the CHIPS and Science Act, where for the first time in my experience, the United States government basically said, this is such an important and critical technology, we need to be involved in facilitating it here in the U.S. Do you agree that we're at a similar moment? Do we have to find a pattern, a mechanism for sharing the risk in these first-generation projects?
I absolutely agree. And really what we're talking about is the first of a kind. Once those designs are licensed, once they're built for the first time, the subsequent designs, and I think some of the incentives that Congress has already passed would work here, I think there will be an appetite to put those into the marketplace. We talked to lots of folks who want to build these reactors both domestically and internationally. If we are to remain competitive internationally, we have to provide the backstops to allow these technologies to emerge.
My father used to say the hardest thing was to get the first olive out of the bottle. All the rest came easy.
Yeah.
That's what we have to do.
Exactly.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Real quick, if I can, before I go to Senator Cassidy. Mr. Stones, everything we're talking about, the other people are hesitant because of basically backstopping it or basically giving them some kind of a relief or comfort that will help you if the overruns. You all have looked at basically the bills that we've passed and made a decision to go forward. Why did you make that decision? You have that much confidence in the technology that you can bring these on within reasonable cost? Because then everything that you're doing, what everyone's cautious about not doing.
Yeah, so, I mean, just to be very clear, inflation has certainly made things challenging, and there's no doubt that we're going to have to
But the credits, all the credits we gave, there's a lot of credits out there.
But our project management approach is focused on managing schedule, cost, eliminating stranded capital.
But you think the technology is there, that you don't have to basically reinvent the wheel?
I think the technology is, we do not have to reinvent.
And you can go to scale.
And we can go to scale.
We need to talk to you more. Senator Cassidy.
I'm okay with that as long as he goes to scale in Louisiana. Anyway, just to say that. I think it was you, Dr. Wagner. There's been a couple comments here about permitting and how permitting can drive up cost, and I think it was you that spoke of how NRC is putting together this new process by which to permit. If it was you, Dr. Waxman, feel free to interject. My staff tells me that, see if I get it here, that what NRC is doing is kind of layering on their previous process as opposed to coming up with a new system by which to permit. And the layering on seems to me, since I know it's been incredibly difficult to get nuclear projects, the traditional nuclear permitted, describing it as layering on something more seems as if that will be very difficult. That'll be counterproductive. Any thoughts on that?
Yes, but I actually think it was probably Jeff Merrifield that was talking about the NRC's Part 53, which was intended to develop a new licensing framework for advanced reactors that was more general and performance-based, but many are concerned that it's not actually achieving that goal. But I'll let Jeff talk
John,
about
thank you.
that.
Senator, thank you for sending the question our way. As a former NRC commissioner, I've been watching this very closely. And Congress directed the NRC to put together a risk-informed, performance-based program for licensing advanced reactors. What the NRC staff has come up with, as John mentions, has layered additional complications on those designs that are not existent in the old licensing process that they used under Part 50 and 52. And so the commissioners really need to take action to send that proposal back to the staff and get it right, because right now it's not going to be helpful. And most of the advanced reactor developers have said they're not going to utilize that framework if it comes out as currently envisioned.
I'm sorry,
Now,
if they don't use the framework's not mandatory to use?
It's not. The advanced reactor developers, most of them are going to be utilizing the existing two-step program under Part 50, which is what was used for, with the exception of the recent Vogel units, was used to license all of our current reactors. And there are examples, I think Kairos is a good one, where that program is working well, where the NRC staff has been able to move it through. But even with Kairos, which has moved, I think, overall smoothly, the back end of the process, after the staff has already made a technical assessment that the reactor design is safe, the mandatory hearing process and how it's going about doing that with the commission and the advisory committee for reactor safeguards is laborious and non-transparent. So there's work there to be done as well.
It begs the question, since you're a former commissioner and you obviously care deeply about this, why wasn't it changed when you were there? Are there some obstacles? I'm not accusing, I'm just asking. Are there some obstacles to changing this?
Well, admittedly, my tenure ended in 2007 before we had a gleam of what we've been seeing today. But, we had to do this very same thing when I was there under Part 52. Part 52 was the two-step, was a one-step licensing program that was used for the summer units, which have now successfully gone online in Georgia. The commission at that time got the first direction from the NRC staff. The staff did the same thing. They went overboard on applying new requirements, and the commission said, go back to the drawing board and give us something that's going to work better. Now, in retrospect, there are some changes to that rule I would have made if I'd known what I know now, but that is the role of the commission. The commission is not a rubber stamp for the proposals of the staff. The commission is supposed to implement the laws and policies of this government to make sure that we have a program that's going to enable the need for these reactors. I mean, Congress has been putting a lot of money on the table to incentivize reactors. There are people who want to buy the reactors, and the NRC process is not aligned with its mission of protecting public health and safety, but doing so in a way that enables the reactors to be used for the beneficial purpose that they're intended.
Mr. Chair, before I yield, I think I have an idea for a follow-up committee hearing. So I yield. Thank you.
And Senator, I'd be happy to come back and expound on that more if you'd like.
Senator, if I may, please.
Sure.
The mandatory hearing, the uncontested mandatory hearing, just one example that Jeff Merrifield just referred to, that does require statutory changes. The NRC are implementing against the requirements that they have, and that includes an uncontested mandatory hearing. So statutory legal, legislative changes are necessary.
Let me just say
Although
something.
I'm not to belabor it, there are things that the commission could do to make the existing required process more efficient, and they haven't.
I agree with that as well. I just wanted to make that point.
Let me say something to all of you about basically the excitement that we have, this new revitalization of excitement in nuclear and so many opportunities in nuclear and so many different variations. My state forever had a law that prohibited any nuclear production in the state of West Virginia. Had a law. Go figure. Anyway, within the last year, the legislature came, we all sat down and we talked, we got opportunities. So if it plays into transition in fossil states, okay, that does not threaten the production of fossil, what we're needing now, but supplements and complements. And if you do it and do it right and explain it, and also basically the public needs to know the safety concerns and the safety things that we have built into this new technology, because they're still thinking of Fukushima, they're thinking of Chernobyl, and they don't know, and that's our job, because I'm convinced that we can do this as efficient, but as safety cautious as anything that we've ever done, any type of production of power that we have in our country. I really believe that. Senator Hickenlooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank all of you for, I know how busy you each are, all of you are, and spending the time here is very valuable. Let me ask a question of Dr. Wagner. I think of this as we're going through a great transition, that 50 years from now we're going to look back and see this as the beginning of something where we really did transform the country. And I think obviously technology will be tied to this, and artificial intelligence, go down the list. But energy is going to be at the core of that great transition. And we're going to have to deploy clean, reliable, cost-efficient energy, but at the same time reduce emissions. Now, the Department of Energy estimates that the United States will need between 100 and 400 gigawatts of new nuclear transmission by 2050 to get to the targets that have been established. That means quadrupling, roughly, the nuclear capacity that's on the grid today. Why are new reactor designs a better investment for federal dollars in going after this? Why does this make sense to us?
Well, for many of the reasons, actually, that you already mentioned in terms of firm, dispatchable, non-carbon emitting energy, broader electricity, but also broader into other energy uses like Dow Chemical is interested in. The question, may be about why don't we just build existing reactors? Why do we need new technologies? And certainly there's a place for existing reactors, like building more AP1000s. But for many customers, those don't fit very well. From a size perspective, that's why we're seeing interest in microreactors, for example, from the Department of Defense. We're seeing interest in small modular reactors in communities who don't need a gigawatt. And we're seeing interest in some of the advanced technologies because they offer features that light water reactors traditionally don't. For example, higher outlet temperatures for example, industrial processes like Dow Chemicals. And so these new advanced reactors offer a variety of different options that have been developed really with the customer's interests in mind. So while I think the world will deploy more large light water reactors like the Westinghouse AP1000, for many other applications, we need these other technologies. These technologies, if I may, offer other advantages besides just what the customers are interested in. They also speak to cost through more passive safety features that result in less complex active safety characteristics, through better options in fuel utilization and thermal efficiencies, et cetera. So there are a number of advantages that really drive the interest in these advanced reactor technologies. Again, while I still see a future for large light water reactors in certain parts of the country and the world.
Mr. Stones, you had your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know if that's the appropriate protocol, but so the The one thing I would also like to say is that, you know, if you think about the operation of a power grid, if you lose a gigawatt of power from one source, that has a tremendous impact on your grid. And then in places like Texas, we see huge power spikes in price as soon as the reactors go down. The advantage of, you know, these reactors are round numbers, 100 to 300 megawatts each. And so, but you put 4 of the 300 or 12 of the 100 in the same place, you have the same scale, but you have an incredibly better sort of delivery of reliability to the grid.
More upfront cost, but better reliability.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Can I just have
Just quickly.
Yeah. You have an 80-year nuclear power plant. If you had other resources, wind or solar, those are 20-year assets. You've got to have 4 sets of those to be the equivalent nuclear power plant. Plus, you've got to have backup generation. One of the issues with cost comparisons, we're not including all the apples. You've got one single nuclear unit, 80 years. You've got 4 tranches of renewable, and all of the backup generation goes along with it. That's where the comparison needs to be made, and right now it's not.
Well, it is. It depends on who's doing the estimates, but the cost of money and the time can be factored in. I want to ask each of you quickly, Mr. Waxman, maybe we start with you. You know, Lincoln famously said, with public sentiment, nothing can fail. Without it, nothing can succeed. Just take a moment. The public sentiment has still not come around on nuclear power yet. It's changing, but how do you see that, and do you see any solutions?
I would say that it's really come around in a big way. Just in the 5 years I've done this program, it's been remarkable. We did a lot of local engagement in Idaho. There have historically been challenges in Idaho because of things that were done many decades ago. But the local support, including the tribal support, the Shoshone-Bannock tribes, they've been incredibly supportive. It's really amazed me how different things are.
We have the same. You know, Calhoun County, which is where this is, you know, talking with the commissioners, they're proud to be leading nuclear for the world, and they're so excited. They got applied for a Texas Business Development Award and won it, and got to attend the session with them. It's a fantastic event. So,
Senator, I think some of it's regional. You come from a state which has been somewhat more doubtful. Polling I've seen, 60 to 65% of the American people are supportive of nuclear power and building more. About 15% of the American people are dead set against it. The remainder are uncertain. So I think the overwhelming majority of American people mirror the overwhelming majority of the U.S. House and Senate that support nuclear power.
All right. Well, Ms. Ryder, why don't you opine as well?
Well, I'll just say we're seeing sort of a generational shift in support for nuclear for a variety of reasons, climate being one of them, of course. And so we're seeing this change actually fairly rapidly over the last 5 years. And, you know, a couple of example data points. In Wyoming, when TerraPower, actually Pacific Corp, was looking at 4 different sites in Wyoming to site their project, you literally had those communities competing to be selected for that. I mean, that's something we wouldn't have seen probably 20 years ago. And I'll also say the carbon-free power project was mentioned earlier. We did not see opposition to the nuclear aspect of that project anywhere in the 7 states, any significant, I should say, opposition in the 7 states that UAMP serves.
Right, and I think we're seeing the change in Colorado as well. I guess the point, I see a gradient when I look at some of those numbers in the urban areas. There are still a significant number of people that are adamantly opposed, which is challenging, not impossible. And you guys are all, I think, my second question would have been, how do you address this? And you all described the arguments and the reasons and the ways you're going about in local communities to address it, and that's how public sentiment changes. Thank you.
Let me ask you this. Are you all surveying basically the opposition that's still out there? Is it a lack of knowledge? Is there a specific reason they're against something? That would be helpful. That input there would be helpful to us, because I can tell you a state of West Virginia that's changed completely with an overwhelming Republican administration we have in our legislature that's changed completely their thought process. We still want coal, and we still have it, and it's needed, but we want to also realize there's a transition. We want to make sure we're part of that. So we've broken that down some.
I agree with what John Wagner said. I think there's a real age variation. When you look at people who are over the age of 60, you're going to see more folks who came out of frankly, the 60s generation.
You guys keep polling that and let us know what you find out, okay? Senator Risch.
Yeah, well, let me weigh in on that question, and that is there is a sea change going on in people's minds. And in my, having watched this over the years, I think it's a couple things. We're still got the 3 Mile Island hangover, which started this whole thing. But in addition to that, the United States is so far behind the curve on nuclear compared to the rest of the world. It is stunning to me, with the exception of Germany. There's always exceptions out there. But I mean, the Eastern European countries are just incredibly hungry for nuclear. They want to cut the cord with Russia. Obviously, that's one thing that's driving it. But all over the world, there's we talk about a renaissance here. We are late to that party here in the United States. I don't know if you guys agree with that or not, but we really are late to the party of what's going on the globe, as I talk with people from other countries. Let me say this. First of all, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate what we're talking about here, and that is how we do this, not whether we should do it or whether it's needed or anything. And I think we need to continue to focus on that. We had that summit that the Intelligence Committee put on, where we had all those leaders from the industry here, had a similar kind of conversation, similar kind of problems, and we do need to keep talking about it, and we need to do our job in Congress to get the law up to date, which is, we get a lot of complaints about that. Mr. Merrifield, I'm really glad that you focused on the financing issue here. That drives a lot of things, and to me, a lot of it is just the way we're set up in the United States. Look, utilities are notoriously risk adverse, always have been, and we're asking them to be on the cutting edge of something that banks and everybody else know that there are risks here. And the risks are not the disaster here are financial disasters. I mean, before there was Vogel, there was Whoops, and now we've got NuScale came along, and John and I have had some very candid discussions, and really appreciate his thoughts on that. And I think, to your point, Mr. Chairman, it is. I can say this. I'm not dragging John into this because there's other things I can say he can't, but. I think that had there been something like a competitive process, or at least somebody looking over the shoulder, that things would have come out differently. I mean, that was a conglomerate of all these utilities that were going to buy this, that had to be subscribed. And it turns out they're some of the smallest utilities in America. Yeah. You know, I mean, the most risk adverse that there could be. You know, and so. The fact that this went south on us, I guess, as with a lot of money winning quarterbacks.
We just got to make the best we can. We can't put the other $700 million out.
And I agree. I agree 100%. Having said that, these guys make the case, of course, that look, we all, most of us here in Congress are bought in totally with the free market, the free enterprise, entrepreneurial system. But because of the size of these things. It does take government partnerships on this, and as much as we hate to do it, and John knows this, I've been talking to those guys. That my first trip to the lab was in 1975. It was a whole different place then, but they were still. We built 52 reactors there, and they did do what the NuScale reactor did, and that is they were plowing ground that hadn't been plowed before. And if you've ever plowed ground, you know the first pass through is the toughest pass there is, and you learn a lot about the ground as you go through. So there is some silver lining in the NuScale project. But again, as we go forward, I think it's we all talk about the science and Senator Hippenloop talked about the fact that why don't we stick with those old designs? If we stuck with the old 1000, I'm telling you, I think the industry would be in catharsis for a long, long time. People are just looking for something different, and they're looking for small. And I've been preaching to the lab for a long time to make them small. And they said, "Oh, you know, we can't do that." And I said, "Look, If you can build it small enough to put on a ship, to run the ship, you can make it small enough to put on a trailer and take it to deepest, darkest Africa where they really need a reactor. And now this is happening. And because that's happening, you're seeing this renaissance where people are willing to look for it. Because if you build the 1000s, there just aren't that many pocketbooks around that deep to build them with the risks that are along with it. So there's a lot of challenges here. But again, I think we need to continue to focus on the how, and as Mr. Merrifield underscored, that how really involves a lot more about money than it does about the engineering. The engineers get it right; they're doing better. They're advancing all the time. But but our process, our financial process, isn't advancing as quickly, and it really needs focus if we're going to move this forward. And we all want to move it forward, Mr.
Senator Kennedy, just a couple comments. A lot there. Utilities also in a regulated environment have to deal with prudency reviews by public utility commissions and getting second guessed. And that you don't want to put your shareholders' money at risk if that's the environment you're going to be in. On your point on Eastern Europe, it is very exciting that they want to move forward with these nuclear technologies. The one point I would make, with perhaps an exception, virtually all of the technologies they're looking at are American-made. The United States has the leading advanced nuclear technologies in the world. I wish they were a little further forward so we could get more of them built tomorrow rather than a little ways down the road.
But the Chinese and Russians got their tennis shoes on, and they are running as fast as they can, knowing where we're going. Do you agree with that?
They're running very fast. I still think we have the best technology.
I agree. Well, we've talked long enough. Thanks so much, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for doing this. I mean, this is a conversation that needs to continue. And
well, let me tell you, if there's only one senator here that deserves this more than any in the beautiful state that she comes from, that could benefit immediately from this, it's Senator Murkowski, and it's her turn to go after y'all. Get this thing done.
Have at it, Senator.
Senator Murkowski.
I'll never forget that visit that Senator Risch took me on to Idaho National Labs and educated me there. This is really a great conversation here this morning. Thank you, each of you. I hope that the enthusiasm that this committee reflects about where we are with advanced nuclear and the opportunities in this space, I hope that that's translating out there to those in the financial community, those that are looking to make these advancements, to know that this support really is growing. Mr. Chairman, you mentioned that in your state of West Virginia, you actually had a law prohibiting implementation. We had the same in Alaska. Our legislature moved on that as well. We are looking very, very aggressively at what more we can do, because as the chairman mentions, when you come from a place where you really don't have any energy grid to speak of, we operate in the world of microgrids. And when you think about a microgrid and what it might mean for a remote community, what it might mean for a remote mining project, where the only way right now to get that project moving forward is to fly in diesel by the barrel, not sustainable, really not the way to go, but that's how we have to operate, and that mine may never happen because of the power issues. So we're looking at this with great interest. Dr. Waxman, you mentioned the Eielson project, the DOD project there at Eielson, and the status with what has happened with that RFP. And you note that from the installations perspective, not all of our military installations are in areas where the kilowatt hour is reasonable. We just checked right now in the Fairbanks area, they're paying 2 cents kilowatt hour for residential and 22.59 for commercial. So we're looking for alternatives, and Eielson is really uniquely poised. Everyone is very excited. We want to see that prototype go forward. I understand that you're limited in your ability to talk about the matter right now. You have indicated that the intention is to award it to somebody. We're hoping that that somebody in that process moves forward quickly. Can you give me any indication how this this temporary setback might have influenced the timeline that we were talking about for the Allison project?
Yes, as I'm not the program manager for that project, I'd rather not speak on their behalf. I'd be happy to take a question for the record and
Okay.
have the Allison team give you that. But you are correct. I was actually just up in Alaska a couple months ago, and had a chance to meet with the governor's energy staff, and also went over to Jay Bear. And I can tell you there are, I know you know, there are places in Alaska that the military needs to power that pay quite a bit more than even 22 cents per kilowatt hour. So Alaska certainly makes a lot of sense as an early location for microreactors. And so we're certainly hoping that some of those can be successful.
Well, I'd like to follow up with you, if I can, a little bit on the timeline, just to better understand that. Again, a lot of enthusiasm, not only on our military installations, but what it might mean for smaller communities and the industrial benefit. And I wanted to ask about Project Pele. And so I guess this is back to you again, Dr. Waxman. How does DOE and DOD working together to make sure that the technologies like we have with Pele are evaluated not just for the military, but for the non-military applications, so that, again, we can look at that as a model, but then recognize that it can have applications outside of our military. Are there factors that you think could limit public adaptation of the mobile reactor when the Pele demonstration is concluded?
Well, I mean, the fact that, microreactors in general are always going to be a little bit more expensive than slightly bigger reactors, so they'll always be for niche applications. I don't think we'll have microreactors in downtown DC. That said, I do think that we are supporting commercial nuclear in a couple of different ways. One is that I would say that our partnership with INL and the DOE team there to develop a regulatory process, this is a how-to-do, I think, in how to get this done. Whichever company is first through the transport in a new regulatory process is kind of like being on the inside of a ship and all the windows are closed, you're kind of bumping your knees and everything, and whoever goes second is going to know where all those bumps are and will be able to get through. I think a second thing that we're really demonstrating is a lot of the technology, because it hasn't been in a reactor before, there's uncertainties about how those materials will behave under these higher temperature and higher radiation environments. How are they going to, expand or contract or anything like that? So the regulatory process has to be a little bit more strict because we have to have these big margins of error. Once you've built an advanced reactor, using these materials, whatever one comes next will be able to have significantly tighter tolerances, and I think the regulatory process will be easier and cheaper.
Senator, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission also has a memorandum of understanding that is involved in a sort of a peer review of these designs, much as it does with the Navy reactors for our carriers and submarines. So I think there will be an opportunity, and there's a lot of sharing back and forth on issues that I think could be beneficial for the civilian application of these designs.
Yeah, just adding that real quick. While the NRC is not regulating the Pele reactor, the NRC sits in on all of our design meetings. In fact, the NRC has been cycling staff in and out just to kind of see the experience of it so they can learn and hopefully take that to whatever commercial reactors are next up in front of the NRC.
Good. Mr. Chairman, I think we've heard some suggestions here today that this committee does need to follow up on. If in fact, this framework that has been talked about is not helpful, if in fact there are statutory considerations that we need to be looking to, we need to ensure that we've got a licensing permitting process that allows for greater levels of efficiency to catch up with the enthusiasm and the interest level.
Well, the ones moving the fastest is Dow right now. Is that the one I say in the country with this technology and trying to implement it, right? You're moving fast. You've been looking at all the different cobwebs of things that might slow you up or could hurt you and all that. So we need to be hooked to the hip to find out how we can accelerate to get you to the maturity stage that basically we can all kind of enjoy that. And Senator, your state, thank God you let me travel with you through the state, and I love it and I enjoy it. But if any area in the country needed micro, I mean, anything from 1 megawatt up to the 50 megawatt range, if that's the state, we need the 300.
We're ready.
We need the succession of 300, 600, 900 megawatts. She needs 1 to 50. That would run her whole state. So we've got to be hooked to the hip. You guys are willing to take the risk, You've evaluated the risk, you look at the credits, and you also know what the maze of network of bureaucracy that could hamper you, and we've got to prevent that from happening so we can show a model of how to get there.
Yeah, I
Okay.
appreciate that.
We have Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the panelists. Thank you for being here. Dr. Wagner, let me start with you. I was pleased to see your analysis of nuclear waste in your written testimony, specifically as it relates to this comment. And I quote, "Simply put, the present framework for interim storage and disposal of the U.S. spent fuel inventory as set forth in the NWPA is inadequate to meet the challenges of today or tomorrow, and a new policy framework is needed." Well, I couldn't agree more with your remarks, and that a new approach is needed. In fact, as you well know, the failed Yucca Mountain project in my state is a prime example of how a non-consent-based process prevents progress on this issue. And that's why I've worked with the state of Nevada to push for the U.S. to incorporate, and my colleagues here and the chair and ranking member, this idea that consent-based framework and findings of the 2012 Blue Ribbon Commission on America's Nuclear Future. So, Dr. Wagner, can you elaborate a little bit more on that, this consent-based idea and the importance of it? But also, from your perspective, I'd be curious, are there any new concepts and lessons from other countries that could be really a guide for us around consent-based U.S. nuclear waste repository programs?
So yeah, and first, thanks for the question. So there are. The Department of Energy and others have been watching and collaborating quite closely with a number of other countries, Canada, Finland, Sweden, and so forth, who have worked through consent-based type processes with, at least thus far, considerable success. It's always a continual process, of course. And so based on that, the Department of Energy has issued grants for communities to participate in a consent-based siting process to understand what are they interested in, what are their needs, what are the concerns, what's the information that they need to, to make a decision about whether or not they would be interested in hosting such a site. And so, yes, there's actually quite a bit going on and quite a bit of information sharing going on internationally. And I appreciate your remarks on the Nuclear Waste Policy Act. I think there's a number of aspects in there, including Yucca Mountain, that have to be addressed for us to be able to move forward significantly on these issues.
Thank you. And what are some of the waste implications of new advanced reactors that we're talking about, and how could these factors affect the search for a workable waste disposal solution?
So several of the new reactors have different fuel forms, which means then they have different spent nuclear fuel forms, whether they're metallic instead of ceramic. There's a variety of different materials that are being looked at, whether they're trisofuel, for example, with the X-Energy project, that will affect how we ultimately dispose of them, if we recycle them, and so forth. And so there's a fair bit of work to do there to work through that. Molten salt reactors, being a liquid fuel form, also present different things that we have to deal with as opposed to our current ceramic UO2-based fuels. And so I don't see any of them as insurmountable. They may affect costs. They may affect some design-related matters, certainly packaging. Certainly our nuclear waste acceptance, as is currently really only envisions commercial uranium ceramic-based UO2 fuels. So that'll have to be addressed as well.
But the idea is to address that waste now, and what we do with that now, as we look at this new form, these new forms of advanced nuclear reactors, correct?
Correct. We have to be thinking about that.
We don't want to do what we did in
And
the
so,
past.
for example, we're working on several different, I put it in my testimony, several different reactor projects on our site. And I'll let Dr. Waxman speak for himself, but I think he has a similar story about how we're looking right now at, okay, before we start these reactors up, how are we going to handle the storage and further for the spent nuclear fuel that will result.
Yeah, what I would add to that is that we've had several companies and states come to us asking, what are we doing with our used fuel? They want it, and they would like to reprocess it and resell it to some of these, whether it's to the advanced nuclear companies or other things. So it's very interesting that, hopefully this will be a very different process where instead of just burying it all on the ground, we could actually reuse a lot of it.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And then finally, I have about 30 seconds left, but Mr. Merrifield, workforce development. This has been key for me, is ensuring that we are also focused on creating the workforce that we need for this new technology. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, typically when you think of nuclear energy, a lot of people focus on having the nuclear engineers you need to design them. But realistically, you need a lot of people who have the other engineering disciplines, civil, mechanical, electrical. The folks who are actually going to get the projects built. We also need to focus on high schools, technical schools, training institutes that can bring the welders, the pipe fitters, the people who are actually going to, women and men who will actually put the parts and pieces together. So systematically, we really got to do some attention to all of those.
And do you think that attention is occurring now? Or will Congress
More is there to be done.
Okay, thank you.
I've got one follow-up we'll start, and I think Senator Risch has a follow-up. Do you have a follow-up by any chance? Okay. My follow-up is simply this: fuel and waste. And I know it's got her attention right now. Fuel and waste. I think that's the two critical things we have to. Most of all this is HALEU, right? Okay, and we know that we're in a challenge there.
Well, HALEU, but keeping in mind, right now, we only enrich 20% of our LEU needs in the U.S. So it's both LEU and HALEU that we need.
What's our capacity here to do that and be self-sufficient right now? I'll use this scenario.
We have one facility in New Mexico that can provide 20% of the uranium we need for the currently existing fleet.
Okay.
We need more enrichment, period.
If we're cut off from Russia right now, and we basically are moving in that direction because we don't want to be relying on Russia, how far and how long can we go with what we have now unless we ramp up quickly?
John Wagner may have a better understanding of that than me, but we would have to tap into European sources. We'd have to tap into sources from Asia.
Are we doing enough in this in our own country right now?
We need to build more enrichment in the United States, period.
Okay.
We need to send market signals to make it happen.
Is anything going on in the private sector? Is that going to be all government, federal, or private?
No, there are, Centrus is being spun up to provide HALEU. There are
This is
other
the one in Pennsylvania?
enrichment facilities. Yes, there are other enrichment facilities that are being thought of by other enrichers. They want the market signals to make sure that they build those facilities that there will be sufficient demand to justify.
Well, they're looking for, long-term agreements. And on that one there, and how about waste? We'll go right into the waste because right now we're paying a fortune basically storing waste at sites. That's going to stop, I can tell you that. What do we do and how can they be responsible for their own waste stream?
To follow up on John's point, there are at least 4 companies of which I am aware that want to get into the recycling business. Take the used fuel that we have, utilize the 95% of the energy that remains, and reuse it for the use in our nation's domestic fleets. Many of the advanced reactor technologies actually enable this.
So my view on, you asked a simple question.
So we don't need a large depository is what you're saying? We've been going down. We've been talking about that forever. Nevada has been targeted forever. Nevada does not have a desire whatsoever. We understand that. The bottom line is, why do we go down and play that
Well,
chase back
we
and forth
would
game?
still need a repository for the remaining materials if you did reprocessing, and we also have to deal with the waste generated by the U.S. Navy.
If you don't.
Sure, go ahead.
I would say on HALEU, the critical path for me for development is an ecosystem that works. The issue is you're not going to have enough in advanced reactor consumers to use all of the fuel that a facility that's built at startup will be able to produce. So somebody other than that first actor needs to enable financially the construction of that facility. And that, I think, is a very good use of government funds long-term.
Well, you almost have the confidence that there's enough in the supply chain to take care of what you're doing, or you wouldn't be doing what you're doing.
I think it's a different answer than that, Senator
Okay.
Manchin. What we have is the confidence that we will take a decision in sometime between 2026 and at the latest 2028 to say that that exists now. We're willing to trust that the government and everybody, because this community is moving in that direction,
Right.
will enable that. But without that, we will not proceed. I want to be clear.
You're very clear. I think I was very clear. I got that. I get it.
Senator, can I make one other HALEU point? We as a country.
Turn your mic on.
May I make another point on HALEU? We as a country have made a commitment to supply Australia with 8 Virginia-class submarines or an equivalent. There is right now no demonstrable source of where the HEU is going to come from for those 8 submarines. So a domestic HALEU supplier, if American-owned, could also help meet that particular need as well, which would help drive demand.
Are we identifying? Okay. Senator Risch.
First of all, Mr. Merrifield, you mentioned in opening talking about supply chain. Look, since the COVID hit and then the Ukraine war hit, this institution is laser focused on the fragility of our supply chain. I mean, look, there's there are poster children for this. One, of course, is enriched uranium that's moved overseas. The other one that's most obvious, again, it affects Idaho because we're home of Micron technology, but our semiconductors are gone. We invented it, and it's gone. It's gone overseas. So we passed the CHIPS Act, intending to bring that back. There's, I think, Senator Manchin, help me out, but I think there's $2 billion in the
2.7.
2.7 in the supplemental that we're committed to rehabilitate, restart our fuel industry here. And look, the supply and demand is a great market mover, and the demand is there, and we want to help that, and we are going to move forward on it. Mr. Chairman, I can tell you that there's at least 4 committees that I know of that are working on the fuel issue and the fact that the industry has gone away and needs to come back. We're the Energy Committee. We ought to take the lead on that. Maybe we ought to have a special hearing on that. I know, I can tell you that the Intelligence Committee is focused on this. The Foreign Relations Committee is focused on this. This committee is focused on this. Commerce has some initiative going on there also. I frankly don't know what they're doing. And there may be another committee or two, but somebody needs to get out front on this, and it should be us. I mean, this is absolutely critical to the production of energy in America. Thank you.
If there's no further questions, let me thank you all. You can tell the interest we have, but also basically for the sake of our country that this is something that has to be done. Because if we don't do it, it will be done somewhere else, and where somewhere else is going to be people dependent and people in a free world dependent on a country that is not a reliable source or a foreign supply chain of concern that could cause us irreparable and irrevocable problems. So what we're doing here today and how we move and how quickly we're able to assist in making this a reality, I think is imperative for future generations. I feel very strongly about that. So what we'll do, members have until the close of business tomorrow to submit additional questions for the record. And again, thank you so much. Meeting's adjourned.